and also of the sutra allowing you to copy it. The sutra is copying you too. This interrelationship is felt intimately, and such a state of being is itself supreme enlightenment. So he said a lot in that paragraph. The sutra is copying you too. So I've never copied sutras per se. What I remember from copying is a Dharma transmission ceremony where there was like 60 pages of copying teachings. They called them kirigami, I believe. Jane might remember more than I do. But I think it was mostly Dogen's teaching because he was the founder of our lineage. And I remember feeling some of that stuff that he talked about in this paragraph, doing that. The sutra is copying you. It's like the world of no inside, no outside, no self, no other, no boundary, no limitations. And it seemed like it was one big continuous sutra, and you do it over a period of months, I believe. I don't remember how many months, but it was over quite a few months. So I remember copying, an hour or two a day, once in a while. But the last sentence, he says, this state of intimacy, this interrelationship, such a state of being is itself supreme enlightenment. So I guess that's another way of saying that we already are what we're seeking. We just have to realize it through looking deeply and through being willing to explore our experience, our intimate experience with ourselves and with the world, with others, with the Sangha. So in our practice, we're receiving the spirit of Buddha, and I think this is the ongoing teaching of Maizumi throughout the book. And again, every chapter I'm reminded of how relentless he is in wanting to bring us back to that main big question. How can we live this life as the one body, the body of Buddha, that we all share together? So that recognition of our shared being, and then offering that recognition back to Buddha. We're receiving it and offering it back to Buddha simultaneously. It's going both ways. And so Supreme Enlightenment is that intimate relationship. That's what Reb Anderson teaches too in the book that we studied last year. So it's that interrelationship of Buddha's great compassion and the world of suffering sentient beings. They can't be separated. They become transparent. When they become transparent to each other, that is the relationship. And that is the realization. That's the intimacy, the deep intimacy of the relationship, and that is the realization of Supreme Enlightenment. So the intimacy is the offering and the receiving, the give and take that goes both ways. So there's another teacher that I've studied over the years who's not a Buddhist, but he's very much a master, a Zen master, because his language is a little different. But he was a very, very deeply realized teacher. And he had a saying that reminds me of what Maizumi is talking about here. He says, "When I look within, I find that I'm nothing. Nothing perceivable or describable," or in Zen we say no thing, no separate thing. And that's wisdom. And when I look outward to the world, I find that I'm everything, and that's love. And my life turns between the two. So to me, that turning is that intimate relationship between the inner and the outer, the small self, well, the different forms that our true nature takes. And that turning is the fullness of our aliveness, as we face the world and then go back inside, which seems to be inside, but really there is no inside or outside, Suzuki Roshi said, when we breathe in, the air comes in from the outer world, appears to come in from the outer world into the inner world, and then breathing out, it appears to go from the inner world to the outer world, but really both the inner and the outer are limitless, boundless, and there's just one world. And so that turning between the two of the being no thing, no describable thing, and being everything, and the wisdom of the no thing and the love of the everything, that is the turning. And that is the state of enlightenment that Maizumi is talking about here. So when we're offering or receiving Buddha's great compassion, and that is the intimacy, and Buddha's great compassion isn't trying to get the intimacy, it is the intimacy. So when we realize that, then we become the intimacy also. And this growing sense of intimacy that I think Maizumi is trying to lead us towards, it compels us. My experience is that I feel compelled by it when I'm open to it, to explore our experience more deeply and go, there's no end to it. So be willing to go deeper, be willing to let attention fall back or relax back into itself. And, and I'm just more and more reminded of that question, who are we? What am I? How can this very being right here and now be everything and no thing at the same time? How can this be the whole? The whole works, Reb had a phrase, the whole works. We are the whole works when we realize enlightenment. So, at some point in our practice, we begin to not find the grasping and the turning away. The practice is to stay present, to not grasp or try to control our thoughts or our feelings, and to not turn away, to learn to welcome unconditionally everything that comes in our life, because everything, as Maizumi says, is the expression of the true life of the Dharma, our true nature, our essential being. So when we begin not to be able to find the separation, that our inner life and the outer world begin to become transparent to each other, that not finding, begins to be a kind of a reinvigorating or a renewal or an enhancing of our energy for further exploration. And he talked about copying the Heart Sutra. So I think of the Heart Sutra as, in some ways, many years when I was young, it was kind of like an empty repetition. There wasn't much feeling for it, and it seemed kind of like a negation of everything, although I knew that's not what it meant. But the Heart Sutra, it says all things are expressions of emptiness. But as Kwang Roshi says, that emptiness is really the fullness, and Thich Nhat Hanh puts a lot of emphasis on this also. The emptiness is the fullness of our life force. It's empty of separations, of all ideas of separations, but it's full of aliveness. It's full of the spirit of love that is the unity of the wisdom and the love. So really, the more deeply we go into this, the more and more teachers will tell us, and this has been my experience too, is that there's less and less personal effort that needs to be made in the practice, in the meditation of Zazen. Just letting the mind go and feelings go back and forth wherever they need to go. And there'll be moments where we feel like we're grasping and we're rejecting, and then experiencing that letting go in many continuing cycles. That's still going on for me, for sure. But there was a story I read in this book, the Essays in Zen Buddhism. It was one of D.T. Suzuki's books. That he was a very famous Japanese translator. That he lived almost 100 years ago. I don't know when. He probably died in the 40s or 50s or something. But anyway, there's this teacher of a Chinese teacher, Zen master, Late Su. I'd never heard the name before. He described that state of practicing with just letting everything be just as it is, not trying to control thoughts or feelings, welcoming everything as much. And he said, I allowed my mind without restraint to think of whatever it pleased, and my mouth to talk about whatever it pleased. I then forgot whether the this and the not this was mine or another's, whether the gain and loss was mine or others. Nor did I know whether my teacher was my teacher and whether Pai Ko was my friend. In and out, I was thoroughly transformed, and then it was that the eye became like the ear, and the ear like the nose, and the nose like the mouth, and there was nothing that was not identified, but there was no thing that could be identified. The mind was concentrated, and the form dissolved, and the bones and flesh seemed to thaw away. I did not know where my form was supported, where my feet were treading. I just moved along with the wind, east and west, like a leaf of a tree, detached from the stem. I was not conscious whether I was riding on the wind or the wind riding on me. So I was fascinated by that, and I haven't experienced, at least I don't think I've experienced the depth of what he was talking about here. But interesting, like embodying, to me, it seemed like he was embodying the impermanence that Maizumi talks about when he says we're living and dying many moments, or many, many, many times every moment, faster than we can count. And, in reading about what he said, it seems like you think, like, I don't know where I was treading. I didn't know who was who or what I was. Am I riding on the wind? Is the wind, in many koans, the wind is a symbol, a metaphor for our true nature. So he didn't know whether I was, he didn't know, am I Buddha or is Buddha me? Or am I riding Buddha or is Buddha riding me? That kind of thing. There's just nowhere to grab on, So it seems like, if you read it superficially, it seems like he's disembodied. But no, it's not. What I begin to see when I have those moments when I know that I'm not the body, just the body, it's not that we're disembodied. It's just that we just are. We just are. We're not disembodied. We just are, free of definitions, free of limitations, free from the confinement of the body, and free to fully be in the body, although we're not really in the body, but we're fully in the Dharma body. We fully are the Dharma body, and allowing, have the freedom to be fully ourselves. I think that's what Reb says when we're training to be fully ourselves as the Buddha body, which is what Maizumi's talking about. To fully be our essential being, and allowing Buddha to act through the physical body. So anyway, that's, this Maizumi's, one of his Dharma heirs said in the preface of the book that, his talks are like a teisho, and Gato shared this too last week, or was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I can't remember, but that the spirit of his teaching, it's just about that living experience of it. So he didn't water down what he was saying. He just laid it out there, what his actual experience was. So it's just helping us to open to possibilities. If this seems too far out or something, but just open to the possibility that you know, that impermanence that he talks about, the positive side of it is that everything's possible. There's no limitations. So we can realize that we are supreme enlightenment that comes through us and all beings together. And I was going to talk a little bit about the lotus plant. I could do that, but I'm thinking I could read a couple of paragraphs that Reb said about the lotus plant that really blends in well with what Maizumi said in this chapter. But I thought since it's about almost 7:18 already, maybe we could stop here and have discussion. Thank you. Bruno has something to say here. Okay, come on.
She can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm turning my speakers up.
Okay. You look just the same as you do on my home computer. You haven't changed it.
Good.
Thank you for your that was a really difficult chapter copying sutras, but I will attest to the benefit of giving oneself the opportunity to try, especially, maybe if people present here do not necessarily come regularly on Saturday and really have not been with the Heart Sutra, the identity of relative and absolute. And I think Saturday Gato's going to talk about the Enmei Juko Kanzeon Gyo that we chant. And to take the time, and I think Reb talked many times about having been sent to his room to copy a sutra, and in that process he gained so much, and it wasn't intellectual understanding, but really connecting with it emotionally. And having just spent the weekend with my great-granddaughter, who was just learning what this world is all about, and then later having an adult conversation with my granddaughter, who's trying to figure out her place in the world. And I know you've recently, probably had many of these with your boys, but we spend so much of our life figuring out the outer world. But then at some point we are forced by life or whatever to pay attention to that connection. And my granddaughter smiles at everyone, loves everyone, tastes anything you put in front of her, whatever, like little babies. And her mom is like, wow, she's so lively, she's so happy and loves everybody. And I said, well, at 9 months, she'll realize she's really a separate person.
Yeah.
She will be a pain to live with. But she's a very vocal child. But we do have that as human development is very common, both exploring the outer, who am I, why am I here? And then one day saying, oh well, did I make, then second guessing, and then exploring the inner. And the only difference for me right at this moment is that in the community like this, there in me, in this body, is so much joy and gratitude and appreciation for having stumbled into this crazy practice. And coming organically to realize that everything that you just said is so true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Lao Tzu, I think.
Yeah.
So thank you again, and
Mm.
I'll see you next week online.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jishin. That was beautiful. As you were talking, I was remembering some months ago, it must have been 6 months or more. How old is she now, your great-granddaughter?
7 months.
7 months. So it must have been about 7 months ago. You showed us a video on the Zoom of her when she had just been born. She was like hours old, and you showed us a video of her as an expression of the mind of the infant, of the innocence of of being an infant. And there are some teachers, I know that one that Mitch liked, Rupert Spira, who sometimes will have people asking him questions to close their eyes and imagine that they're an infant with no memories and no sense. Just let your mind go where it needs to go, but don't think, don't try to describe what's going on. And then reach out. That he'll have, the true test of reality is our actual experience. So he'll have, okay, reach out with your eyes closed and touch an object in that state of mind with no memories or anything, and realize that in the mind of an infant, there is no object there. There's just the sensation of touching, And so those types of exercises where really deeply explore the experience of thinking or the experience of feeling or seeing can open up windows where we see the unity kind of comes in. Like Maizumi says, it's easy to unify the experience there when you really just stay with just doing it, just being. So those types of explorations are not often used in Zen practice that I've known, but they can easily be incorporated in, and they can be very useful.
Well, Kinyin.
Kinyin, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Feel your feet on the floor and follow your breathing. Yeah. That Kinyin is one place where it's easier to stay present because it's easier to unify the walking with the breathing.
Hello, you online people. Just unmute if you'd like to offer insight. And of course, folks here. If we have to stay a minute or so later, we won't die. We'll share your insight.
Hi, she can.
Hi, Pam.
Ask because it stuck with me when he talked about the seed. The seed was carried. We always think of like flowering and then the seed's coming from the flower, but the seed is carried within the plant. So I'm going to ask you what you think that means.
Were you asking me what I think about that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let me see what he said about that. Well, yeah, and he mentioned that, I remember reading it, he mentioned that it was unusual for a flower to be that way. And I wasn't sure how relevant that is, but I think maybe the deeper meaning was that we always are, like even our great-granddaughter, can be, is the embodiment of the Dharma without maybe the means that we develop to apprehend it or to realize it or to see it more fully, but that there's never a time when we have not been the supreme state of enlightenment, that the seed has the full flowering within it. The potential is there, and the essence of it is already fully present.
can type pretty fast. I'm a fast typer. I can type mindlessly, you know. And it's interesting in the psychological research, when kids take notes in school and use the computers, they don't remember. That if they write something, if they physically write it, then they remember it. And so, you know, when I prepare a talk, I don't do it on the computer. I actually write it out by hand. And it's interesting because I find that I think slower when I'm writing. I process in a different way, in a deeper way. And when I bang stuff out on the computer, I do a lot of editing. But when I write out something by hand, I do much less editing. I find that writing it by hand on a piece of paper is really the expression of what I like to say, and it comes out the right way. And so, you know, I think this time last year we were kind of right in the middle of copying lots of stuff and doing lots of lineage charts and all of that kind of good stuff. But, you know, it's an opportunity to slow down and to think and ponder and process, and not to gain information. But I think maybe it's a way of just allowing the sutra to begin taking up residence in your mind and in your heart in a way that is that doesn't happen in other ways.
Thank you, Roshan. That's beautiful.
In cursive,
Yes.
because it is part of your brain. Those of you that have been printing or typing most of your life. It's true, sorry.
I was just thinking how the act of writing a sutra or copying a sutra reminded me of doing a rosary. Like I know in my rosary 108 times you say the same thing over, and it, like the essence of it is to just drum that into your heart and until you can really understand it and embody it. And that I think it's sort of the same kind of process or similar.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point, Tammy. You know, it's similar to maybe using a mantra. I've been using a mantra for a few years, and after a while, it just starts going by itself. You don't make the decision to recite the mantra, and I don't feel like I've gained anything from it except I've been following my breathing. I'm paid more attention to my breathing, so maybe there's less mind wandering. But there's a connection there, and there's, you know, some teachers in more bhakti paths will say if you used a mantra, at some point you discover the rosary of the mind that opens up new avenues. So I'm waiting for that to happen. It hasn't happened, but it's that spirit of doing over and over again. You know, that one of the earlier chapters in the book, there is an opening there, and just our earnestness and our following and receiving the calls to look deeper, continually looking deeper and finding new ways to explore. Yeah. So we're sort of at the end of the time here. Does anybody else want to say anything?
Thank you for your talk, Ken. I liked that Maizumi said when copying the sutra copies you. And that reminded me of just that this is an embodied practice. The last time I went to school, when I was in PA school, nobody had a computer. And it was good because the kerosene lamps would have melted. But I took notes, you know, in I remembered when I was taking notes in pharmacology class and in anatomy class, once I wrote it down, it was mine. I owned it, but it owned me. So I could never look at things the same way again once I wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same way with Zazen, that once you sit the first time, when you go to sit again, it's never the same sit, but you never feel the same, or I never felt the same about sitting on a cushion after the first time. It was like the cushion owned me, and I owned it, and we were a team.
Yeah, great.
Anyone else like to offer Cliff?
What works for me, if I'm reading a sutra and I think I understand it, to write or try to express my understanding of that in a haiku. And I think the real benefit, at least to me, is not so much in the writing, but in the discipline, or the attempt at least, of trying to condense my understanding in 17 syllables. And when I condense it into 17 syllables, I think I finally, at least in my own mind, I got it.
Yeah. All right.
Announcement?
If you had fun tonight, wait till Saturday. Fusion is still here. So we hope to see you all at Zazenkai. Begins at 8 in the morning, ends at 3 in the afternoon. Snacks are provided. Bring your bagged lunch and your Dharma questions for Jishin. Roshan and I are off the hook. And I think it's going to be a very beautiful day, and we're very grateful to have Jishin visit us. So I hope you get to take advantage of that.
Well, I'm the winner here. I mean, really.